Hi, good day to everyone, especially to my students in Introduction to Philosophy of the Human Person. This is your video lecture for your module number 7, the human person in the society. For this lecture, we have this outline, an introduction on what's economy, and then for the content for most of this part, we are talking about the three main theories of analyzing society, or the three sociological paradigms. We have three to mention: symbolic interactionism, structuralist functionalist theory, and lastly, conflict theory. And how can we put them into everyday life as part of the outline to wrap this everything up and the conclusion. Basically, this lecture is more about finding yourself when there are people around you. I think you're familiar with the quotes like "No man is an island," or you've heard Michael Jackson who sung a song that "You are not alone." And then in philosophy, we have Aristotle who have really highlighted the idea that it's not right for a human being to live alone. So that's why, because man by nature is a political animal. And this lecture answers a question: what does it mean to be human in the modern society? And will help you understand yourself as a human being. And to know this, we need to understand three main theories of analyzing society. And these are symbolic interactionism, structural functionalism, and conflict theory. Okay. These three theories, actually, these are all sociological paradigms. This is coming from the discipline of sociology. But since this is a philosophy subject offered in a senior high, we're gonna be focused more on the theoretical side rather than focusing more on statistics and a lot of figures, those numbers, demographics, which is the forte of sociology. But we're just gonna talk about all of these ideas and how these sociologists try to philosophize and making sense of how in this world. And the three theories here, symbolic interactionism, structural functionalism, and conflict theory, we classified them into two. Symbolic interactionism is what we call the micro perspective, looking at the smaller picture of things. And both structural functionalism and conflict theory, they are part of the macro perspective, looking at the bigger picture. And we need both the micro perspective and macro perspective to understand fully what it means to be human in a society. We need to see the reality from up and then down. So it's a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach and then a top-down approach. But so that you have a holistic picture on finding what it means to be human now. And first, we talk about symbolic interactionism. This is a sociological theory that explains society based on interactions people make in reference to the meaning they attach to things. And it's quite easy to understand. We really attach meaning to things, especially in the way we communicate. Let's have traffic signs, for example. When you see a picture like this, you immediately know that the green light means go. And this symbol, you already know that this is Wi-Fi. Because you know that you belong to this generation when technology is available, and that symbol automatically will bring will help you understand. And this is Wi-Fi. But if it is 50 years ago, if you ask our grandparents about show this symbol, they would not be able to recognize this because of the mere fact that they were not able to interact with a particular symbol, or they did not interact with technology as the same way as our generation. So this is symbolic interactionism on the go. Or if you see this picture, you immediately know that this is the Philippine flag because you are part of the Philippine society. If you ask Dato Lapu-Lapu or Haring Humabon years before, they would not be able to recognize the symbol because there's no such thing as a nation, the Philippines at that time. We are an archipelago of divided chiefdoms. And because we are already born in the moment the Philippines has already established itself as an independent state, we are now able to recognize that this flag means the Philippines. And we are also able to recognize if the flag looks like this, it is wartime. Automatic dayon na makaibaw ta nga mo ni siya ang mga meaning ay mabutang nga because we have already interacted in the society with attached meanings such as this. And this is just an introduction for you to understand symbolic interactionism. And in the same way, what is really symbolic interactionism? And there's a lot of theorists who have already proponents of this particular paradigm. I'm just gonna mention one. See, Herbert Blumer, who was able to summarize the assumptions, three basic assumptions of symbolic interactionism. According to Herbert Blumer, the first assumption is that we act depending on the meaning we attach to things. Like for example, if we do something like this in the Philippines, especially during mealtime, it is an invitation that let's eat, nga unta, something like that. And the second assumption is different people have different meanings attached to things. So if this is kaunta in the Philippines, but if you go to Italy, it means different. Kung maginana ng Italiano, it means to say he is very much angry, furious about the things. Lagot na gigay na. And the third assumption, the meanings we attach to things can change. Let's say you have the opportunity to visit Italy and then went to Rome, somewhere in a restaurant niya. Kay Pinoy lagi, gusto kita mangagda o mga tao like to eat, and then we invited a certain Italian to eat, and then they say kaunta, and then lahi na meaning ang nakita niya sa gesture. Nasuko siya nimo. So there might be some conflict there going on, and because of that interaction na medyo negative, it has already taught you that this is not this kind of gesture does not only mean let's eat. You have already learned that it's somewhere in it, like that place like Italy, it means different. And now that interaction have already transformed the way you understand this particular gesture. And even if you go home to the Philippines and then ngagda kakaon, something like this, you will always remember that moment when you have interacted with an Italian and gave you a quite furious reaction. And probably you become more cautious on how you use this symbol. And that's how symbolic interactionism would try to shape the way we understand things. And it's not only limited to hand gestures. In the social sciences, symbols are almost anything. It could be a place like a school, or it could be your people, it could be your teacher. For example, for a lot of students, a school is a place for learning. Sometimes for us, teachers are like our second parents. There's a meaning we attach to them. But for some people, school may not be necessarily a safe place, especially if you experience bad occurrences like bullying, for example. Or maybe your teacher is very strict and inconsiderate, and that's why you don't like to go to school. Then your teacher becomes some kind of antagonist in your life, and that's the meaning you attach to it. And then someday you meet a different teacher who's very much kind to you, and therefore your image of a teacher becomes changed over time. Symbolic interactionism goes that way. It's not only limited also with the people you directly interact. It could be like your pop stars idol. Like for example, your post-millennial generations you fancy so much in K-pop. Like boy bands like BTS. They don't meet you personally, but as if they have an impact to a lot of young people today in the Philippines. They are not Koreans, but they keep on saying "안녕하세요" and keep making this hand sign. And because they have interacted through technology, and whatever they see on the screen has a corresponding influence to them and shape them who they are as people right now. And even books can be a source of knowledge, or and you're just gonna read. But for some people, this is an additional burden. The same way with students, how they look at the logo of Google Classroom. Especially there's a notification and they say, kapuyat ka, trabahoon na po. Something, something like that. But for us teachers, Google Classroom is a good learning management system that will give us a single avenue to check all of your papers rather than put them in a desk which things go lost and unorganized. So we have different meanings attached to things, and it could change someday. Just like, for example, the face mask before was very much limited within the medical field, or those who are rescuing places like, especially there's a lot of smoke or wherever. But now, because there is a pandemic, the face mask has changed its meaning. It's not only because we are wearing face masks today because we are afraid to get infected by the by the coronavirus, but also it could be a meaning of a sense, giving us a sense of security, so that the authorities would not capture us. Na dili ta madakpan, hadlok ta madakpan mo nana. Or something like that. Or depending on how you regard how you regard all of these things. And in a nutshell, symbolic interactionism would really say that in the ground level, the way we interact with different people can also impact the society. In the same manner, the society can also impact you. And just like, for example, let's say, go back to this BTS, for example. They impact you. Now, you're listening to their songs. You feel some kind of surging energy inside of you, and then wala. But because a lot of you have become fans of them, and your support has also impacted the market for Koreans to generate and produce more music from their side of the world. Kung wala po support nila on the ground level, I don't think K-pop would proliferate the way is it now. Dili na sustain nilang income. And interactions in a basic core has very much have been a dynamic force in understanding the society right now. And in a philosophical standpoint, as the sociological paradigm of symbolic interactionism compels us to ask deeper about human nature. And questions like, are my dreams really something I come up, or have I been influenced by the people around me? Something like that. If you want to be a doctor, is it really because you really want to be a doctor? Or is it because you saw someone in your life who is a doctor, who have been a good model in the medical field, and then you told yourself, nah, I want to be like just like that kind of person? Or is it because you have some such of experience wherein you see a lot of sick people and you felt the need that you need to help those people, and then that's why you want to become a doctor? There are things like that, and symbolic interactionism provides a lens. And try to investigate your own dreams. Why did you dream that way? Who are these people na nakapa-influence nimo na mo na imong buhaton? Who are the most important people in your life? Kinsa man ning mga tao na so meaningful to you? That, for example, your parents are not only just parents giving birth to you, they are also your heroes, your comfort zones, or your huggable teddy bears or whatever. Or kinsa man ning important na mga tao sa imuha? What are this meaning to you? Or if you're born in a different place or different country, would I still think the same way? Because the society in symbolic interactionism, it's one of those basic assumptions is the way you think right now is very much determined by the society you belong. But if you are going towards another place, would you be thinking the same way as you are thinking today? And with that, that's gonna be a very deep philosophical reflection to you. Or is it just, am I thinking the way because I thought of this way? Is it a product of my own individuality? Is it really because this is how I think, or is it because I've been influenced by a lot of things that way? Just think about that. Or if I'm born in a different place or a different country, would I still think the same way? I think ibalik ka na. Or how open am I to change whenever I encounter something new? Because one of the basic assumptions of Symbolic interactionism is the meaning with change. But whenever you encounter something new, how would you react for someone behaving a different way from your born culture or whatsoever? These are things. Now you might be useful in your philosophical discernment on finding how human you are based on the different interactions. And that's on the ground level, finding the human person in the society. But it's insufficient to explain the entirety, the complex whole of the variety of systems within society. That's why we need macro perspectives, and that's why we need to tackle first structural functionalism. And structural functionalism is a sociological framework that analyzes society as a complex system with different components that work together to achieve social stability and solidarity. And take note, Emil Durkheim here is one of the founders, or let's say one of the founding fathers of sociology. During his time, he was born when the time when France was at the brink of the Industrial Revolution. There's so much change happening, and within that rapid change in society, he was very much concerned whether is France going going in the right direction of change in history, and he is much concerned with stability and solidarity. Let's talk more about that. And for you to understand simply the way structural functionalism, you imagine the society as one organism. Just like an organism, we have different parts. Like you examine the anatomy of the human body. There's a brain, there's a bones, there's a heart. It has different functions, and whenever there are parts of the body that will suffer. For example, you just gonna walk somewhere and then you step on a sharp glass na napunok ka and then nagdugo. It's not only your feet that suffers, it's the entire body that feels the pain. In the same manner, society, we are composed of different parts, like a single organism that supports each other. We have the family, we have teachers, we have policemen to protect us from all deviant forces in the society. And then all of these sectors, which a lot of I did not mention, they support each other in order to sustain the life of this organism we call the society. Unya, how do we, just like the human body, whenever we feel diseases, certain parts produce white blood cells as a necessary part to combat all of these pathogens or whatever threat to the organism. In the same manner, Emil Durkheim would say that we also have diseases in society, and crime is one of which. And to the extent that Emil Durkheim would claim that a little bit of crime, is a necessary ingredient to have social cohesion, to have some social integration, in order for this society to sustain itself. Okay, if there's no crime, we would not have a sense of consciousness. What are the right laws or regulations? Just a little bit of crime is necessary for society to survive. Otherwise, we might not have a good sense what is the right thing to do whenever things are like this and that. Like for example, if there are no theft, kung walay mangawat, probably there's not much development when we talk about security or mga padlocks or making our walls higher, something like that. And crime, although it's not necessarily a good thing, could be a necessary component for society to function. And there's a structure in general, as we see in structural functionalism. And yeah, imagine it as a one giant organism. And in a philosophical point of view, let's try to examine further the concept of anomie according to Emil Durkheim. And this is a product of his thesis entitled Suicide. And he's trying to search for explanations why there's an increasing rate of suicide in France at that moment, at that time, during Durkheim and the Industrial Revolution. And he said that anomie, which is a societal or personal condition, which is a product of less social regulation. Kung wala na kayo rules, wala na kayo masunod, and then there's so much emphasis on on the individual nga kung individualistic ang imong panato sa mga butang, dala na kay pakialam kayo, there's indifference in the society, and the breakdown of which will resort to anomie. Unlike crime, which is a necessary component, anomie could be a result or a symptom of all of so much crime. It's different when in a feudal society, when a lot of occupations has concentrated very much on the agricultural sector, like in farming villages or fishing villages. It's almost everybody have some kind of homogeneous na identity, like everyone farms, and then they see their place in a particular community. But in industrial society, modern in the urban areas most especially, there's not much solidarity within your peers. You don't depend on each other. You depend on yourself how to survive, and then manikamot ka saan nimo na makasurvive sa society. And for Durkheim, anomie is a symptom of all these urban industrial conditions. Unlike in the province na bisag nasa pikas bukid pa na silingan na gyapon na ninyo. Pero sometimes karon sa syudad, bisan gani magsaw mo o kanang bungbong, even if you share the same wall, you don't know each other, dili mo magtinagdanay. And this is one alarming problem Durkheim saw in his research, and this is actually a product of division of labor and the rapid change in the society, which in a lot of ways people had a hard time to cope up with all these changes that happening. Kaya if the division of labor, they have a crisis. What am I gonna do? And then in the factory setting, for example, which is very much rampant in the Industrial Revolution, you don't really mind what your other colleague is doing. And then after your work, you sleep and then eat and then go back to work. And this change structure has influenced a lot of suicide cases. This is according to Emil Durkheim. And then there's an absence already of the things like festivals, rituals, and all the other events that makes us human, or other structures that has been existing in the tradition of Europe at that time. It has been absent and during the Industrial Revolution, and that's why people experience anomie, and they need to find a way out of this anomie. And according to Durkheim, suicide has been a solution for them. Okay, let's have an example closer to home. For example, here, we are very much, every time there's a fiesta celebration in honor of a patron saint, or in whatever church we belong, we prepare a lot of food, and we invite people. Like say, istas amo ali mo. We invite, even if you're not really close to them, you invite them, and especially your relatives, you invite them. And yeah, there's a lot of people there trying to see, oh, besh kadaghan niyo gikay ay asenso na lagi you. It's a sign. It's not only a sign of prestige that you were able to host such grand feast. So, and then the reality is, this is just an inutang runitanan. And sometimes people will try to comment, maybe not really speak it, maybe in the mind of a person, yung tuga-tuga, pinigkasto, di man ay maka-afford, mora ning kauna, something like that. This is a real life situation wherein there is a clash of different ideals from our traditions and modern standards. Like, knowing what is practical, especially when we talk about financial security, is something that the modern world demands. You need to be spending not beyond our means. But in the tradition of Filipino society, fiesta is not only because you want to feed the entire population of that locality. It's not that that's not the main point. It's not also because you want to flex your wealth. It's not also the main point. In understanding it in a Durkheim's point of view, when they say about social solidarity, I mean, borrowing money for the sake of having a good feast has its own function in the structure of the Filipino society. And if you cut that practice na dili na maghikay sa fiesta, it's probably a reason why your relatives from faraway places would not go back to the hometown and then reconnect to the ties and blood relations they have in a certain village or town. And then that's why people maybe if you apply Durkheim's theory, this is why people maningkamot na sila na makahikay because that's the only opportunity at least once a year na makauli ang mga parinte. And then, adto dito, maghikay. That's a function of all this celebration, just like a fiesta. Or the same way with Christmas. For example, you give, and then, mga tanan ka, kinahanglan, dito ay magpasko, aron manghatag og regalo, or something like that. But all this celebration, all these symbols around, this has a certain function. In a structuralist point of view, regardless how much you earn from it, this is a necessary component na kinahanglan. It's necessary for the organism to survive, and in order for it to survive, you need to have social solidarity. And this is what events just as this, as bringing, this is something that makes us human. Social solidarity, or like social cohesion, or this how we identify ourselves with other people. And Durkheim is very much concerned with that particular aspect of human nature. Oh, and in philosophical standpoint, sociological paradigms such as structural functionalism emphasizes the need of social solidarity as part of human nature. And then, can I ask some relevant questions? What's my role in society? Or how should I contribute? There's a structure there. How do you imagine yourself in the structure? Asa man ka serve? And then, how do I remain functional? How do I get out from the status of having anomic conditions, mawaka sa anomy that we mentioned before? And what traditions in my culture should I preserve? Because tradition is there for the main function of social solidarity. In the same manner, what practical ideas in the modern age should I follow? Because if we're gonna cling in the past forever, we might have some problems moving forward to the future. And that's why we need to decide what we need to do. So this is in a structural functionalist theory. However, there are some limitations in structural functionalist theory. Remember that very awkward explanation that crime could be a necessary thing. As the same thing with poverty may not be necessarily bad, because poverty will make us realize how much we need to distribute wealth. We need a different perspective in a macro scale, and this is where conflict theory shines the most when we try to analyze the structure of society. And the main proponent is this guy, Karl Marx, who focuses so much in the inequality of the society. For Marx, there is a power dynamics and it's like a pyramid structure in the society that they govern everything. Like in the feudal system, there's the peasants, and then up na ay mga the merchants, and then there's the soldiers who kind of propagate, and the religious leaders that kind of he spreads so much propaganda, fooling the people, and then the wealthy, the royals, the elite few, and then the top, and that's capitalism at this time. And in the same way, in contemporary society, is the businessmen, elites, those people who are having high positions in the Fortune 500 in the capitalistic world. And in a pyramid structure, those elite few people in the top, they enjoy so much revenue compared to the majority of the people who are working hard for them. And conflict theory provides this lens. And there's the power struggle between two main classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie is what we call the elite few, the powerful people who have the control of the mode of production in the capitalistic society. And also the other side of the coin, the proletariat, the working class, who have nothing else to invest aside from their labor, and they work for the companies of bourgeoisie, and this is a working class sector. And Karl Marx is very much concerned in the welfare of the proletariat. He wants to empower the working class so that we can see change in the society. And the more relevant concept of the understanding a human person is the concept of alienation. And according to Marx, there are four types of alienation: alienation of the product, alienation of labor, alienation of others, and alienation of the self. Okay, let's first explain alienation of the product. Alienation of the product. For example, this painting, Das Polarium, has been painted by Juan Luna. And Juan Luna would really say na this is my work, this is my obra maestra. This is really, I really painted this. It's different from the products produced in the industrial age, especially if you are a person working in the production line in the factory. Let's say in a factory, there's someone who will make the machine of a car, for example. So another set of persons will make the tire, ang ligid, lahi mo himo sa ligid. And then, lahi po na mo himo sa car frame. And after the finished product, who owns the car? It's not any of these workers. No, nobody of them, no one, nobody of these workers can claim the car. It's unlike in the painting wherein Juan Luna really has the confidence to claim and to see the value of his own work. But here, the worker can only say, sana all na ay car. Wala ay mabuhat ang worker, di ka pwede makaangko na imuha na. And who owns the car? It's the capitalist who has the mode of production. And this is what we call the alienation of the product. The things that you produced here is not something that you can really claim a certain degree. This is really something your own, or ma-recognize nimo ang value sa imong effort or labor. That's alienation of the product. The second type of alienation is the alienation of labor. Alienation of labor is when there's too much division of labor here. Unlike Juan Luna here, that knows the process of painting from the imagination stage to the blending of colors to the brushing in the canvas. The factory workers don't have something like that. They only know how to be an expert in making a machine, how to be an expert in making a tire, how to be an expert to weld all these car frames. They are not interested. The one making the machine is not interested in the one making the tire. And the one making the tire is not interested in the one making the car frame. They are just focused on what they're doing. And they just gonna reduce the value of their labor on the wage that they receive as a form of compensation of their efforts. Well, slag, bahalag, di ko ka maumuhimog likid, basta naalang ko'y sweldo. And that's an alienation of labor there. You're not, unlike here, or unlike an author who has been writing a book and then can really claim full mastery of his own craft, the same way with Juan Luna with his painting. The factory worker can never claim a mastery of his own craft of making the entire car, because the whole process of making this particular product has been very much fragmented and even compartmentalized into different regions para dili siya makopya and all of this. This is alienation of labor. And we all know this. Division of labor has been a very efficient principle of economics to produce more from less time or less resources. But the effect is an alienation, as Marx has pointed out. Alienation not only of the product, but also of labor. And also alienation of others. And we talk about the third type of alienation is we alienate ourselves in a factory setting. They alienate themselves. within each other. This guy will compete with this guy will compete with this guy. They don't see each other as friends. They see each other more of like competitors in the acknowledgement. And then the employee would say, I could be employee of the month. Because if he is the employee of the month, this guy cannot be employee of the month, or this guy cannot be employee of the month. In the same manner, like this is hopefully relatable sa inyo, but we have this education system that rewards a few students in the honor list, na a first honor, second honor, third honor, and what's gonna happen for those who are not of the honor list? Salin-salin lang sa katalingban. What's gonna happen to them? Are they gonna be discarding them? And then that's why it's a quite alarming state if if students could not maintain healthy competition within the classroom, and they're going to resort of not seeing their classmates as lifelong friends. Instead, they seeing them as a competitor for grades. Like, for example, you have this smart classmate, and because you don't want this classmate to earn more in the exam, you don't let them borrow their notes. Bilis lang pagkawam sa notes nila. Or like if you get absent and then you are running for first honor, and then you got absent because of the like sakit ka sa kadlaw, and then you ask help from the second honor, and the second honor will say, "Allah, I don't have notes bisag naa gani," just because the second honor will really see it as a chance na pwede ka mugamay mong score sa exam, and he could get your spot there. And that's alienation of others. And alienating us from others is going against our primal instinct for survival that we have been working together for the several millennia already. Humanity survived that way, that we did not live alone. But in the industrial age, in the factory setting, we have been looking at each other as some kind of enemy. And lastly, this is not really the verse. The verse is the alienation of the self, or the alienation of the species man. Because in the factory, you keep on repeating a routinary set of activities over and over again. Magsige kag balik-balik sa imong gibuhat and try to question, tao ba ko ani? And it alienates us of what makes us human. Because to be human, it demands our own creativity, demands a sense of passion that we need to pursue. We are not born just to live and work something that we need to repeat over and over again. It's contrary to human nature. And this is a disease, especially very rampant during the Industrial Revolution during Marx's time. Kinahanglan tagaan o pagtagad. And the only way out, according to Karl Marx, from this alienation setting is to let in the modern society for the workers to need to unite. There's a united needs to unite and overthrow the class system. And this is a process of historical materialism. Like for example, here in the scenario, we have factory workers, and we also have this capitalist. Let's just have an example from Kadinang Ginto for this. And then this is a brood capitalist. Ako masusunod mga hampas lupa. And then there's workers who are empowered enough. They want to fight for their rights. And then some certain individuals also cannot fight for their rights because they are already empowered. They're no longer part of this production line na routinary ilahang trabaho. And then HR nako. And in order to overthrow the capitalists, we have certain movements like labor unions, and they want to take back the workplace. They want to be in control in the mode of production, so that the capitalists would not have any say, not just because they own the machine. In order for the capitalists to be overthrown, according to Marx, is for the proletariat, this working class, to take control of the mode of production. And in a Marxist dialectic world, there's always a process here that conflict is always a necessary part of change. And this has been working on for several centuries already, like the empire, bourgeoisie, until the mabot to the point that there is socialism, when there is a classless society, when there is no one who is rich enough. There's no longer this pyramid structure, we need to get out from this. And in Marx's dream, in the Marxist utopia, nobody's rich, nobody's pure, nobody's poor. Everyone has a state that looks at the equal distribution of resources. And it can only be achieved when people would try to submit their egos and all their self-interest into something like that. I mean, it's a necessary thing. And there have been attempts, like in the Russian Revolution, for example, on the height of the USSR, which challenges the capitalistic ideology of the US at that time. And then China also was a communist country, but they are now capitalist, economically speaking. Russia, right now, the USSR has been collapsed. And then we see that, communism is not working properly. However, doesn't mean that conflict theory and all of other Marx ideas are not necessary now. It's still very relevant. We see it in a lot of scenarios, like labor unions, as I already mentioned, are protecting the rights of the marginalized sectors, like the IP or indigenous people, giving voice to the voiceless, who are being discriminated in the current system we're in, or even women. A lot of women groups have been fighting for several decades already, and now women enjoy suffrage. They can vote. They can also work in an employment scheme. Before, women cannot do that. And also, like the LGBT community, for example, after several decades of bigotry against them, now they have been recognized as a separate sector because they need to express their identity. And these are all products of several conflicts in the process of historical dialectic that Marx has introduced. And this is just an application of which that conflict theory has been very much necessary in the change that had occurred in society, especially when there is inequality and injustice going on. Okay, in the capitalistic setting, we glorify so much the achievements of a renowned few. Like we say, there are doctors, lawyers, people who has 6 digits in their paycheck, businessmen, entrepreneurs who have been boasting that, you know what, I can earn money while sleeping. We have been glorifying that as if greed is a virtue in this modern world. But we can looking at these people, because we are in a capitalistic economy in the Philippines, we can really say na, oh sana all we aspire to become like that. And they say, how to be like that? Hard work hard. If you say the value of hard work, and it's nice to value hard work, we say sana all. But if you agree with Marx, you say na it's not sana all, it's dapat all. Dapat all should be whatever the doctor is enjoying should be everyone else should be enjoying. And probably not now. Maybe if the technology is enough. Maybe if everyone has the right skill set, or maybe Marx's dream will be realized. Or for right now, as the way you see with all this pandemic going on, it's still a specter of capitalism. But hopefully, with all right intentions, leveling the social ladder, leveling that pyramid going on, to have a classless society, which is Marx's dream. Hopefully, though quite difficult, hopefully would be something the future generations might enjoy. But I don't know. Let the people decide. And in a philosophical standpoint, sociological, the paradigm of conflict theory exposes the unequal power dynamics in modern society that set the conditions threatening our human nature, as we mentioned about alienation. And to be critical on these existing structures, we need to ask the right questions. For example, who benefit the most in the current structure? Kinsa may nabulahan ni tanan? Kinsa may nadato? Ani ato ang kuan aning structure karon, sistema natong gi-practice. How should we, kuan, in applying alienation, how should we value our own work? And how do we say na we're still human at this moment? Balik-balik na itong trabaho and all of these things. Are we paid enough whenever we work at something and then gibayaran ba ka sa sakto? Sakto ba yung sabot? Is it right? Are you properly compensated? Or how can you be critical when society is ill when there are cases like corruption and all of these anomalies committed by our leaders or our authorities and other public servants? Do we need to speak out for it? If I witness inequality in the society, how do we react? Pasagdan na ba nimo or just be indifferent and the cries of the poor and the marginalized and those who are neglected? And what kind of change do you aspire in society? And I leave you the choice there. And what kind of participation do you want to practice in the political and grander scheme of things? Which part of history do you want to be in? And that's a more critical question, and that conflict theory would try to incite from each and every thinker in the society, hopefully. So, going back to the main question of this lecture, what does it mean to be human in modern society? So, wrapping up, in a micro perspective such as symbolic interactionism, we see ourselves as part of our human nature that we acknowledge each and different influences, each and different people who have attached different meanings or things, places na nagalain meaning, and that influences the way we shape our way of thought. In structural functionalism, we see the society with a set of functions and try finding out where in the structure are we gonna contribute or are we gonna sustain this particular organism we call the society. In conflict theory, we see different power dynamics and probably be critical enough to see what's the right thing to do. Is it right that we maintain the structure this way, that someone else benefit more than us or than those who are down? Is this something that needs to change? Should I incite some conflict so that there should be some kind of developments that's gonna go on? These are questions. In philosophy, both philosophy, sociology, or allied sciences and the social studies would invite you to think and be critical on matters that's gonna affect each and every person on the planet. So as a conclusion, the sociological paradigms of symbolic interactionism, sociological functionalism, conflict theory, they provide different lenses to analyze society. And it's not only these paradigms. We have a lot of things to talk about. I'm only discussing the most basic lenses. We have a lot of angles to look into. For example, technology, especially right now. Are we more human when at the advent of artificial intelligence? These are future advanced topics that you might be able to take up in the future. I don't know. Or what's part of to be human is to be social, whatever happens in society. Especially in modern society when we experience sometimes anomie, as Durkheim would say, or alienation, as Marx has coined the term alienation. How do we remind yourself that we're still human, despite all the routinary and repetitive actions that we do in modern life? And in a philosophical understanding, learning these perspectives help people reflect our position in the modern world, and most importantly, guide them what to do in the global world. And the change, if we use conflict theory, the change is not only limited within our local context. We need to mainstream our local realities so that we can challenge global standards in a way. And the change should be starting in all of us. And that would be all in this lecture. If you have questions, you can ask me. We have Discord to do that. Or you can leave a comment below or subscribe that button, smack it, and then we're just gonna eat and continue this narrative so on. For that, thank you very much for listening for the lecture. Bye.